Here was my dilemma. I didn't have a great intro, and I love a great intro. So this has been frustrating. So I've given you two titles, if that helps. So we're just going to, we'll barter, okay? So one of the titles is The Cross and the Crossing. So what I'm trying to do, when you have something in the form of a cross they call it cruciformed, and art can come like that, and you can put letters like that, and obviously the sermon title is like that, the cross and the cruciform. So it's supposed to indicate that what we're going to be doing this morning is identifying how the Bible joins these two events in such a way that gives us greater clarity into what Jesus did on the cross. So here's the other title, The Red Sea, and then making it in the cruciformed way, it's the Red Sea crossing. Because we're taking the Red Sea, the Exodus, culminating in the Red Sea, and seeing how that is used in the New Testament. So let's go. Let's do the little bit of geography first. We got the Arabian Sea, we got the Persian Gulf, the Mediterranean, and the Red Sea. So that's this is a big picture of what we're looking at. We got Egypt over here, and the Arabian Peninsula, and this little box right here is the area that we're going to be really looking at, and there's the Sinai Peninsula. So if you can kind of get a sense, Egypt, the northeastern part of Africa, and then up there you would be in the Mediterranean, you're going to see part of Europe, and then it goes right into Asia on the other side. So you're right in the crossroads. God put all this happening in Egypt and Israel. They're right in the crossroads. They're just connected to all of these areas where they can spread out over time. Anyway, so here we go. Here's the Sinai Peninsula. There's the Mediterranean. We're looking in that red box now. There's the Red Sea. And then we have the Dead Sea up there. And if you can look, it's really small, but you can see up there, there's the Sea of Galilee. Kind of get your kind of bearings. This is a satellite image. And then you have the Gulf of Suez, the Gulf of Aqaba, and Arabia's over here, Egypt's over there. You've got Goshen or Ramses. So we're talking about the Exodus. So there's Succoth, and when everybody was coming out of Goshen, they went to Succoth that first night. And then there are many ways that you could travel. And there are lots of theories about how the Exodus happened. I'm going to give you my favorite, and I'll show you an alternative, because there's lots of them out there. But it's fun to read about, I just wanted to get the geography in your heads of what's going on. And here's another route that they might have taken. I favor the upper route, but this would be the Nuebe crossing, and down below here is the Straits of Tiran crossing. Now, the Nuebe crossing is interesting because in that area of the Gulf of Aqaba, which they would call the Red Sea, there's a little bit of a saddle up in there where the crossing would be. And it's still 30 feet underwater, but you could see where there could be like a land bridge if God was to part the sea and you could walk through there. Not that we're trying to make miracles easy for God to do, because, they're a miracle. He can do it. But the topography of the Straits of Tiran crossing, it's really up and down, and it just doesn't seem like God would choose that if all he wanted to do was part Red Sea. He'd have to be moving, mountains and stuff, and he could do that. So either one's possible, but we're only told that he moved the seas apart. So maybe it was the Nuebe crossing. Now, there's other people that think they came down Egypt and then went right across, the Gulf of Suez, and that could have happened, but the Bible seems pretty clear that they went into They went out of Egypt, and the Egyptians would have thought of that as the Egypt side. So probably not that. Anyway, there's lots of theories out there, and because it happened so long ago, it's really hard to get a good understanding of what or the path was or what is. But let's just keep going. Okay, so there's Edom, Moab, Edom, the land of Midian. So that's a lot of where Moses was spending a lot of time, and it's actually a little bit farther down, but it covered that area. And then this is a possible site of Mount Sinai, the Jebel El Lawaz. I'm butchering that, I'm sure, but so I like the thought of it being there. I like some of the evidence that supports that. But there again, is it important? Not necessarily, but it's kind of fun. The traditional site, and if you went to Egypt, you'd say, hey, where's Mount Sinai? And they would point you to Jebel Musa. Anyway, it'd be right there. And so then if you took the Nuweiba crossing, you'd go there and you'd go to Mount Sinai that way, and you'd go, if you took the Tiran crossing, you'd get there that way. So if that helps, I think it's interesting. It was fun to read about, but that's my preferred crossing. If I have an opinion and I get to have one, that's the one I go with. Okay, and just for, you can see if you can see it, there's boats in the, right there before the mountain. You can tell that's a major shipping port, shipping way. The Suez Canal goes up and through there, so that would be the traditional site. And this is the site that some people are really thinking could be Mount Sinai. All right. Let's get to the Red Sea crossing. We're going to read the scriptures that we're going to be looking at, and then we're going to go through it, see how it works with the New Testament, and then go through the scriptures again and see how it works together. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his servants was changed towards the people. And they said, what is it? What is this that we have done, that we have let the people of Israel go from serving us? So he made ready his chariots and took his army with him, and took 600 chosen chariots and all of the other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of King Pharaoh of Egypt, and he pursued the people of Israel while the people of Israel were going out defiantly. The Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and his horsemen and his army. And he overtook them and camped by the sea, by Pith-Haroth, in front of the Baal-Zephon. And when Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they greatly feared. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us this way to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us to bring us out of Egypt? Is it not what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. And Moses said to the people, fear not, and stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians, whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you will have only to be silent. And the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? Tell the people to go forward. Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so that they shall go in after them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his hosts, his chariots and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh and his horses, and his chariots and his horsemen. And then the angel of God, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove back the sea by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, and the water being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and his horsemen. And in the morning watch, the Lord in a pillar of fire and a cloud looked down on the Egyptian forces and threw the Egyptian forces into a panic, clogging their chariot wheels so they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, upon the chariots, and upon their horsemen." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal course when the morning appeared. As the Egyptians fled into it, the Lord threw the Egyptians into the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, and all the hosts of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained. But the people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians, so that the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. So let's look at what we're going to be looking at. Seeing the Exodus through a New Testament lens, the crossing and the cross, our responsibility to his work, a hope-filled journey, and saved through the waters of chaos. So we're going to all cover all that. So let's look at this is one of the most pivotal events in Israel's long, long history. Probably the most defining moment in the whole of the Old Testament. Plagues that violently extracted Israel from their abusive masters. A slave revolt where the ancestral God of the Hebrews, outnumbered, took on the whole panoply of Egyptian gods. The culminating and dramatic Red Sea crossing. The triumphal story of rescued slaves becoming a freed people, now en route to the Promised Land. The journey where they will be fashioned into a new nation by God's presence and blessing. Now, there are at least 24 direct recountings of the Red Sea crossing in the Old Testament, and a fantastic amount of allusions to the redemptive episode. These events inspired art, songs, and weave their way into the Old Testament's prophecies and poetry. The New Testament recognizes the redemptive spectacle of the Exodus. God's rescuing power was on full display through the forced migration that would eventually birth his people into a nation out of a very hostile Egyptian womb. The New Testament also does more because it interprets the events through the greater clarity of the New Covenant. And so it offers us dynamic word pictures of the Red Sea crossing that finds its greater and ultimate fulfillment in Jesus' own exodus from earth, his own crossing. If I can use the words crossing in the cruciformed way, as the two titles for the sermon suggests, then we'll be looking at the crossing of the Red Sea in light of the rescuing dynamics of the cross of Christ. Now let's look at the way the New Testament ties these two pivotal events together, offering us greater clarity. All right. Seeing the Exodus through a New Testament lens. Now in Matthew, it tells us the prophecy But to get there. And he rose and he took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt. And remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Out of Egypt I called my son. Now Matthew is using that as a reference to what Hosea said in Hosea 11:1. But what Hosea was referring to in Hosea 11:1 is this. He said, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. Hosea was not even thinking about the Messiah one day. He could have been, but he wasn't. He was directly relating that to the Exodus. So in the New Testament, we're giving greater clarity even of what that meant. They're connecting these two events in such a way that we want to see Jesus like his duties, like the things that happened to him, was like the Red Sea crossing. It goes on further. The New Testament does just a great job. Seeing that, but when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel. For those who sought the child's life are dead. So he got up, and he took the child and his mother, and he went to the land of Israel. Think about some of those parallels there. The children of Israel are in Egypt, and they're crying out. I mean, Moses was saved by them, by the midwives not killing the kids, as the slave masters, the Egyptians, were telling. You've got to kill all the male children. And they're in Egypt. And then Jesus has to go to Egypt because Herod was trying to kill all the male children. And I mean, there's just dynamics that are happening that are similar. And we see in the Transfiguration in Luke 9, let's look at this. And he was praying, and the appearance of his face was altered, and his clothing became dazzling white. And behold, two men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now, departure there. When Moses and Elijah spoke of his departure, what a conversation. There's some things in the Bible, I get so curious. I want to know. I want to know some of that. But one key thing that we don't hear with our ears, because if it was in Greek, we would hear it. But that word departure in Greek is actually Exodus. So when people were hearing from Matthew, and it's in the Greek language, it would have been cued in on like, oh, Exodus. Moses was talking about Jesus' Exodus. Interesting. And he says, people would have, well, how does, interesting. In the book of Hebrews, Jesus has been counted worthy of more glory than Moses. Connecting those two. And we know that there's many things in the Old Testament that when we look at back with the New Testament lens, we go, oh, that was a type and a shadow. And the Red Sea crossing was a type and a shadow too. Moses was faithful in all God's house as a servant, to testify to the things that were spoken about later. But Christ is faithful over God's house as a son. That tells us what Moses did is lesser. And what Moses did was amazing. It was great. But what Jesus did was even more. It's more substantial. What Moses did was a shadow. But what Jesus did gave that shadow substance. Again in Hebrews, by faith the people crossed the Red Sea on dry land. But the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. Now, the Israelites had faith in their God, and their faith led to their salvation. The Egyptians didn't. So their attempts to walk in the way of the Israelites, well, let's just say they found themselves a little over their heads. Right? In fact, from the scriptures, we know that those Egyptians who followed after the Israelites to bring them back into captivity or kill them, understood that the God of Israelites were fighting against them. Both received what they faithfully witnessed that day. The Israelites were saved, but the Egyptians were cut off and destroyed by God's power to protect his own. First, in the book of 1 Corinthians, our fathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea. And all were baptized into Moses, into the cloud of the sea. And just a little bit later on, down a few verses, these things happen as examples to us. So, the Bible right there is connecting what the Israelites did going through the sea as in the New Testament understanding of baptism too. So that the New Testament really connects these. It's very Christocentric as we look back and we see, oh, so we can look at the Red Sea crossing with the lens of the New Testament and find things for ourselves. And it's really kind of fun. So, the crossing and the cross. You're stepping out of bounds. And that's to say that they were literally walking out of their bondage. They're stepping out of bounds. They are going to be free. And this is just an incredible thought. So let's go to the crossing. Let's get a little context. Let's go just a little bit before, because I think it's important. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines along the coastline, although that was near. For God said, lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. So, God had a plan. This Red Sea crossing, nobody knew what was going on. God's leading them. And he said, you know what? I'm going to help these guys. I'm going to lead them in such a way that they are going to have a freedom. That I'm going to send them out. They're going to see someone trying to go to war. When they see war coming upon them, they're going to see it. But I'm not going to take them the easy route. Well, I'm not going to take them the way that the world would think would be wisdom along the sea, the easiest route, the most gentle route, where there's lots of provision. I'm going to take them a different way to ensure their safety. And to the Egyptians, this looked like stupidity. Worldly wisdom, when God's leading you, worldly wisdom sometimes defies logic and understanding, because God has a plan for your life. And sometimes that plan will not make sense. It just won't. but it's follow him. If he's leading you, follow him. Once a slave, now free. The immediacy of salvation. Do you understand? They were let go right then. They were taking off. They're out of Egypt. They're free. But they didn't feel free because they were going to have pursuers. When we had a condition in our life, and it was very significant to us. When we got our little girl, and she came into our home, it happened so fast. We met a young lady that wanted to place her child with a family. And in 17 days, that child was born. And on that 18th day, she came to live in our house. And it was a whirlwind. And it took a while for the legality of the adoption to take place, where we got all the paperwork, we did the home study. It was less than a year, but months. And through that time, we had to keep reassuring ourselves, because you hear the horror stories of these things blowing up. We had to reassure ourselves that our daughter was ours. The paperwork hadn't caught up yet. The reality was she was ours. And she continued to stay ours, and the paperwork caught up, and that made it all legal. But we had to keep telling each other, we're going to trust God is involved in this. We got her the day after she was born, and she's been in our house the whole time. And legally, we didn't have all the things in order yet, and we believed everything would come in order, but we had to stand in faith on that. Now, the Israelites were free. They were moving out. They were on their way. They were outside the boundaries of Egypt. They were free. But they had to stand in faith that they were free. They had to walk the walk. They had to move in the direction that God was leading them, or their freedom was in jeopardy. I mean, if Kathy and I, in the midst of that adoption process, says, this is too much, I can't believe, this is too hard, we could lose her, we're just going to give her back. It's too hard for us. No. No. We knew how good it would be. We knew that we had prayed, that we were thinking about having another child come to our house. And there's so many things about this that seemed like God was doing it. It felt miraculous. The ways we got connected, how things happened, how we just fell in love with that teenage girl and we've continued that relationship throughout our lives, and she's a delight to us even still, and Amy being in our lives it's awesome. But it was immediate. Amy was in our lives, but we had to walk out the process of making it all legal and making her a part of our family. Travel and worship restrictions. Now you're moving on. If you can remember some of the story of the Exodus, it all really centered around Moses showing up and said, hey, we just want to go out in the desert and we want to pray, we want to worship, and Pharaoh says, no, don't do, okay, no. I mean, it's this back and forth. And Moses finally, go, go, go. And now they're on the move. Context again. But God said, lead the people around the way of the wilderness towards the Red Sea. And the people of Israel went up out of the land, out of Egypt, equipped for battle. They were free, but they had the implements upon them. They had to fight for their freedom right then. They had to contend for it. Did they need the weapons of war right then? They didn't. But they needed to be prepared. God said, equip for battle. And when you see them coming, just be ready. He's setting them up. And the Lord said he went before them that day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. So, that's awesome. I mean, you're in the desert. Not many people, these slaves, I mean, they weren't hanging out in the desert. I mean, Moses knew some of that area, but I mean, they needed help. This is a lot of people. It's wonderful, and to sense the presence of God in a cloud that could, possibly bring you shade, and a fire at night to light the way. I mean, this is extraordinary for a slave revolt to have such care, I don't know if you can even call it a revolt, because I mean God was fighting for them through all the plagues and stuff. It's incredible. God leads us in ways that are incredible, that we can see when things are darkest in our life, that we have a presence that can soothe us when the day is hot, and that we can walk after him, and we can stop where he says stop, and we can go when he says go, whether it be day or night. And when the king of Egypt told that the people have fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his servants changed towards the people. And he said, what is this that we have done? We have let Israel go from serving us. Man, that's just a really nice way of saying it, huh? Oh, we have lost our servants. They had lost their slaves. They had lost their slave labor force. And they didn't want to do the work. They wanted to make them do the work. They're like, if they leave, who's going to make the bricks? If they leave, So, we'll read that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Well, this is Pharaoh hardening his own heart, isn't it? This is simplistic, but it's always been the way I've understood it. And it's always served me well. You've heard the term perhaps, the same sun that that hardens clay softens wax. So the immense power of the sun, it just matters the material that is shining on, doesn't it? If you are like wax to him, he can melt you. But if you are like clay to him, he will harden you. God gave Pharaoh plenty of time, plenty of possibilities to be a great birthing agent for God's people. I mean, this could have gone down a different way. If Pharaoh was receptive as Egypt was when they invited the Israelites into their fold out of, because of Joseph's supreme planning for the, when he saved up for the years of the famine. When they had bumper crops. I mean, they were like, oh, you guys are so awesome. Come. Yeah, you want some land? We've got great land, and you can take your crops. I mean, you can take your flocks and raise them, and this is awesome. But as Egypt hardened to this other people group that wouldn't relent in their ways, that wanted to be and retain their Hebrewness, their Jewishness. It's like, make them slaves. There's getting too many of them. Let's just kill all the males. They become a real hostile environment. And God says, we got to birth you out of there. We're going to get you out of there. I have heard the cries of my people. We got to get you out of here. God responds to his people. His cry for help. Obligated to serve other gods, now they're getting to serve the real deal. I mean, in Egypt, they had so many gods. And they were obligated to build things for those gods, to serve those gods. And that was hard on God. God didn't want that for them. They didn't want people who are forced to believe in something that's unreal. So he made ready his chariots and took with him and took the army with him, and he took 600 chosen chariots and all the other chariots of Egypt with officers all over them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the people of Israel while the people of Israel were going out defiantly. I like that. They were going out defiantly because they, in those moments, believed in their God. They had gone through the pestilence, the plagues, the extraordinary acts of God that proved he was so much bigger and stronger than any of the gods of Egypt. I mean, you remember how the whole plagues started out, Moses comes into Pharaoh's court and he does the signs that God said, you do these first. And then the magicians and stuff of Pharaoh's court did the same. And Moses would, God through Moses would do something, and then, the Pharaoh's magicians, they'd do the same. And after the third plague, God just keeps on doing stuff, and the magicians of Egypt, the sorcerers, the people who had the magic arts or dark arts or whatever kind of things they were doing, they couldn't keep up with God. And it softened the hearts of all the Egyptians, but Pharaoh, man, he was a tough nut to crack. But God was creating an environment where the Israelites could praise and worship their God, because he was strong, he was mighty, he was the real deal. And the Egyptians pursued them, and Pharaoh's horses and chariots and his horsemen and his army. And they overtook them and camped at the sea of Pi-hahiroth in the front of Baal-zephon. And when Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. They're like, wow, we're free. They said we could leave, and it doesn't feel like we're free. Yet, freedom or salvation comes in an instant. Now this is unlike any other religion in the world, Christianity is. Because every other religion it talks about, oh, you know, if you want to make your path towards God, have the right perspective and keep doing the good things and develop into, you know, a godly person, have reflection, you know, meditate, you know, keep on becoming the one that will get you into nirvana, into, you know, the hands of Buddha, all this stuff. But the truth of Christianity is, you were a drunken bum, a prostitute. And in those moments, you were outside the kingdom of God, and the next moment, you're in. It is immediate. You didn't have to do anything for it. You didn't have to grow into it. You had to realize your condition. You needed a Savior, and you just lifted up your hands and said, God, save me. I am screwing up my life. I need you. I don't want to do the things I'm doing. I want a better life. Bam, you're in. You are saved. This is our own humanity kind of religion. I got to get cleaned up before I come to God. And Christianity says, no. You come to God and you get cleaned up. Why? Because He saved you. Why do you get cleaned up? To stay saved? No. You get cleaned up because someone has just done the most amazing thing in your life. And you just want to worship Him. You just want to thank Him. You just want to be worthy. You want to change your life because you love Him. You want a better life because, man, you know it counts. You know that's real. You know, He's amazing. He has just poured out His grace on you. And you can do nothing but worship Him the rest of your life. Because He just saved you out of filth. The direction of your life was headed nowhere. You were headed to hell. And He says, I got something so much better for you. Your life will be completely changed. And it is immediate. You don't have to work up for it. You don't have to clean yourself up for it. You get saved. And in a response to such a loving act, you love Him. Before you hated Him. Now you love Him. It's immediate. It's amazing. But it is not without fear. Because you have a former life. You have a master that even though He has no right to you, He would like to scare you to death. He would like to remind you of your old life. He would like to breathe threats to you. And the Pharaoh had threats. Bring him back. Or kill him. I mean, he wanted slaves, but he was going to threaten every one of them with death if they don't return. Either you're coming back or I'm killing you. He had no right. He had let the people go. They were walking out their freedom and they would see their deliverer. Because the Egyptians had pursued. When they had let go, the enemy had no right to these people. And God was going to show them He had no right to them. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, "Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us to die in the wilderness? Now, I had to stop it right here because I think there's complaining out there, and complaining is horrible, but this is the art of complaining, isn't it? This is hilarious. They're talking about Egypt. What is Egypt known for? They got tombs all over the place. They got places to bury bodies everywhere. And he's asking, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have brought us out in the wilderness to die? This is hilarious. They're scared. I know they're meaning it, but this is hilarious. This is complaining at an art form. It's just hilarious. What have you done to us to bring us out of Egypt? Is it not that we said to you in Egypt, leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. Now, hold on. Fact check. Is that what they said? I don't know if they knew it at this point, but they're going to have a written record. Let's look. Because is that what they said when they first met in Egypt? Is that, I think we have it in Exodus 4:29 through 30. And Moses and Aaron went to gather all the elders of the people of Israel. This is earlier. And he spoke to the words to the Lord had spoken to Moses, and did the signs in the sight of the people. So this is right when Moses comes back from his 40-year camping trip where he was a shepherd in the desert running away from Egypt from anyway. You guys know the story, right? So he's coming back. This is his first meeting with the people of Israel that he's supposed to bring out. This is before the plagues. And the people believed. And when they heard the Lord had visited the people of Israel and that he had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshiped. This was the true response that they had. They're just making up stories in that other thing. Oh, yeah, no, didn't we tell you to leave us alone? There were hard points during the plagues, but this is their response to God. And it got complicated, and it got hard, but this was their response. In fact, a reality check, is this what they would say? Because two chapters later in Exodus 3, we hear from the Israelites again, and all the people of Israel said to them, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat around the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out in the wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger. Now, the Israelites were really good at complaining. I'm telling you, this is... You'll read the Exodus, as they're traveling through the wilderness. You'd hear it a number of times. Manna, we're tired of manna. Give us some meat. You're taking us out the desert. This is horrible. It's like they didn't even remember they were slaves. Now, this painting depicts the Nubian and Asiatic slaves toiling, making bricks. And the Egyptians called people from Canaan Asiatics. So, so Nubians, that would have been people south of Egypt, probably around the Nile area, or they could have come from other parts of Africa. So they were slaves. And also, the Canaanites had become slaves. Because, Egypt had a lot of public works projects. They needed slaves. But see, the Israelites remembered the food they had in Egypt. And because they were hungry, that's all their flesh remembered. And we get like that in our walk with Christ. oh man, I remember when I used to party and get drunk, and man, I used to have friends, or whatever, I don't know. And those low points of life. I remember when, I wasn't tithing, and I bet I had more money then. There are challenges that we meet along the way in this journey, and we complain. And God will challenge those complaints, as he did with them. So, our response to his work, the grace of crossing over. Be silent and see what God will do for you. And that we see that in the scriptures. And Moses said to the people, "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you will only have to be silent." He's letting them know what's going on. Today, the Lord will fight for you. This is going to happen today. And you know what? What you need to do in this moment? Stop complaining. You need to be silent. You need to stop. You're spreading this demoralizing speech, and you need to stop. Whether it is with friends or inside your head. There are points that we have to speak to ourselves and say, okay, self, you need to shut up now, because I am going to have faith. I am going to believe what God is doing in my life. And he is good. That is the definition of hope. God has something good in store. We need his hope through this process, because there are times where this doesn't look good. What's going on around us in this world does not look good. But God is saying, have faith, quit complaining, watch what I'm going to do. Fear not, stand firm, be silent. Very good advice. And the Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward." We have no indication that Moses was crying out to God. We don't see that at all. But remember Moses' role. Moses was the mediator. So when God speaks to the mediator, he's speaking to the people too. And he's saying, why do you cry out to me? Tell the people to go. Get ready to go. You are going to go. I said stand firm, but it's stand firm within you. But you're going to need to move. Stand firm and have faith in God doesn't mean you do nothing. It means you wait for his next assignment. And his next assignment to these Israelites was you're going to need to go. Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the people of Israel may go forth or may go through the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they shall go after them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his hosts and his chariots and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. This is kind of an amazing picture. God is giving Moses the assignment of parting the Red Sea. And what he needs to do is lift up his hand, lift up his stick, lift up his staff. That's his job. And God is going to confirm his leadership by parting the Red Sea. I mean, wow. He's holding a stick. That's his job. His job is just to do what God said, do this. Hold up a stick. The seas will divide. How hard is it to follow God? Well, if you think holding up a stick is going to make you a fool, maybe you won't hold up a stick. Maybe if holding up a stick, you go, that's kind of silly. I don't think I want to do that, God. But when God says, when you do that, I will do this. Wow. Then the angel of God, who was going before the hosts of Israel, moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was a cloud and the darkness, and it lit up the night without one coming near the other all night. Nobody predicted that. And now they're seeing God at work. They were marching out defiantly. Then they started to feel like they're running away. But now they're seeing God active. They're seeing God making a barrier between the people who are pursuing them. They were safe. But it might have been scary, but they were safe. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. And the Lord drove back the sea by a strong east wind all night. And he made the sea dry land. And the waters were divided. And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, and the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them, and in the midst of the sea, and Pharaoh's horses and his chariots and his horsemen. And in the morning watch, the Lord, in a pillar of fire and a cloud, looked down on the Egyptian forces. And they threw the Egyptian forces into a panic, clogging their wheels so that they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, "Let's flee from before the Lord, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and upon their horsemen." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal course when the morning appeared. And the Egyptians fled into it, and the Lord threw the Egyptians into the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen. All of the host of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea, not one of them remained. Your death sentence has been rescinded. The enemy is cut off. God said, no more. Egypt must have thought that the Israelites were total idiots. They didn't take the shortcut. They didn't take the shortest route. They went wandering into the desert. And then when Pharaoh got word that they were backing themselves up against the sea, and they knew the topography of the land, they knew there was no way out for them. They're like, this is going to be like shooting ducks in a barrel, or I don't know what the expression is. Shooting something in a barrel, fish in a barrel, I don't know. This was going to be easy. We are going to go out, we're going to bring them back. Because even though Egypt had let them go, they didn't want to let them go. The enemy of your soul does not want to let you go, and he wants to intimidate you. He wants to pursue you. And God will make it such. The enemy is cut off. He has no power in your life. He will influence you. He'll try and do his best. But they are free. They have to walk in their freedom. They have to contend for their freedom. But the power of the enemy will be limited. And it can't enslave you again. You have to walk out of your slavery. But it can't pursue you to death. It can't pursue you and have the upper hand, because you're God's now. Your freedom is in his hands. But the people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. A hope-filled journey. Transformed and transforming. So we see that. We see that in these wonderful word pictures of the crossing of the Red Sea. They are transformed. They are no longer slaves. They are free people. But God is also transforming them, because we know that you can get the slaves out of Egypt, but it's hard to get the slavery out of the former slaves. We live with the ties that we forged before we were saved. Whether it be an addiction to alcohol that we have to walk out now. I mean, sometimes people, and I'm happy for these people, they're wonderfully delivered, and they said, when I got saved, I didn't take another drop. Well, good for you. Other people struggle with those things, and because of God's presence in their life, they win victory after victory after victory after victory, and continually move forward in their freedom. We are saved positionally in Christ. We are slave. We are set free. But there are areas and individually in people's lives where we have to walk out that freedom. We have to find those things. We have to open ourselves up to God's leading and get our freedom. Not so that we're saved, but because we are saved. We walk out that freedom. This mob of former slaves are now on a journey to becoming a nation with God as their leader. They had to learn what it meant to follow God. He was instructing them. Okay, you're here now. Quit complaining. Watch Moses. He's gonna lift up a stick. And through his leadership, the waters are good. Moses would have had to just been like, oh my gosh, this is happening. Look at this is happening. And the waters part, like, thank you, God. Because otherwise, I would just be holding up a stick. And I would look like an idiot holding up a stick. I know you're the real power behind this, God. And for whatever reason, you've chosen me in this moment to hold up a stick. And you're doing stuff. Thank you, God. They're becoming, and listen, as the people are going through in the midst, great walls of water on each side, it's dark, where they have the light of the pillar of fire. And they're walking through an area, water on each side. And you got to know that some people, they're just different personalities in this world. And we know them because there are some people walking through that water on that night going, this is so cool. Look at that. Oh my gosh. I can't swim, but this is awesome. We're going through. Look at this. And there's other people in the midst of all those Israelites that are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Oh. They all walked through, didn't they? All those personalities, all those degrees of faith. Why? There's some people that have a great degree of faith, and other people who are wimpy faith people. But they all cross through. Why? Because it's not based on your faith. It's based on the object of your faith. And they all had the same object of their faith. God was saving them. God saves all kinds of personalities, all kinds of people, whatever situation people are in. The most desperate. And the most casual. Like, I know I need God. And then there's other people saying, I know I need God. I so know I need God. And He will save both. And they will have different journeys. And they will have different responses to God's power in their life. But they have to have faith in God. It's not the quality of their faith. It is the object of their faith. The community, discovering what it means to be the called out ones. In the New Testament, we call it ecclesia, the ones who are called out. The Hebrews were called out to become a community. They weren't called out to be an individual. They were called out to be a community. Ecclesia, the church. The church is called to be a community of believers. We're called to be a community of believers. The strength of a church will be based on the strength of the relationships that people have in that church. If people have strong relationships, it's a strong church with a strong God leading them. If we don't have strong relationships, people will just walk away and it doesn't mean much to them. So, one of the reasons why we go out, we do things in the community, because I get to spend time with you. I get to work with you. Maybe we have a meal at some point. I get to know you in a different setting than here. We're called to have relationships with each other. Ones that I can say to Phil, you know, I'm praying for you. And I know that sometimes your back hurting. And Phil, I know you're coming into a time where you're doing a lot of deliveries. And that can be a time where your back really flares up. Because you're working hard and you're working long. And where I can think about Tom and like, Tom, man, I know you went through surgery. I pray for you. I just want to see that health, that you're able to move around really well. And I haven't checked in with Tom, so I'm not sure where he's at, but I see him getting around. And now with Sue, they just had surgery. We know things in people's lives, and we care over each other. We pray for each other. The strength of a church is made up on the individual relationships we have with each other and with God. Now, if we just have a whole bunch of people with a relationship with God and not relationship with each other, we don't have a strong assembly. A family that he calls his sons and daughters. I mean, the children of Israel. What a privilege to call him Father. The intimate expression of a little kid calling him Abba, Daddy. To have that warmth of relationship with him. Because he's awesome. And he challenges us to grow. But he loves to spend time with us. And he runs to us when we're hurting. And when we're messing up. And when we're making bad decisions. He's running towards us. As we're opening ourselves up to the Lord. Lord, I don't want this. You've saved me, but there's crap in my life and I don't want it. Save me, Lord. All right. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and the Lord saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great power of the Lord used against the Egyptians, so that the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. Saved through the waters of chaos. How can this be? Did you guys catch this? Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. And the Lord drove it back by a strong east wind all night and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. Does that remind you of anything? And the Lord drove back the sea, a strong wind, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. If you think about Genesis 1 and 2, and then a little bit farther, but in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was all over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So where we have the waters, we have the Spirit of God, which they would sometimes, the pneuma, the breath of God. So we have breath of God over waters. And on another day, and God said, let the waters under the sea be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Let the waters be gathered together, and let the dry land appear. Can you see that? I mean, it's fascinating. There is this allusion back to when God created the whole world. And in this Red Sea crossing, God is creating a people for his own. And he uses water in a very similar way. He divides the water. He creates something. In the creation account, he creates something for us to live on. And in the crossing of the Red Sea, he creates something for his people to come out and live. But in the midst of that, there's judgment and there's salvation. And this seems to be a theme with God. Let's look at more of them. Now, in Genesis 6, 5 through 6, and the Lord saw the wickedness of man, and that every intention of his thoughts was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted they had made man on earth. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, for I am sorry that I have made him. This is This is an act of judgment. And it's an act of decreation. Whereas before, God in creation created the dry land. Now God is saying, let's start over. This is not what I wanted for man. To have evil in his thoughts continually and without remorse. And it was a horrible, God was, this is not what's going to happen. But in the midst of the decreation, the judgment of God, there is this salvation too, isn't there? With Noah and the ark, the animals. Just as, well, let's look at another situation even. In Jonah, and we see, then the Lord rose up. Jonah rose to flee of Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, but the Lord hurled a great windstorm upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest at the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. And we know the story well enough that Jonah was fleeing from God wanting to save someone. And when he said, "No, God, I'm running away," when he entered into this horrific sin, God says, you're going to face some decreation. You're going to face judgment as a result of what you're doing. And Jonah knew it. I mean, he was a prophet. He knew what was going on. And then they said to him, "What shall we do?" Oh. What shall we do? What shall we do to you, that the sea may quiet down for us? And he said to them, "Pick me up and hurl me into the sea, and then the sea will quiet down, for I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you." I mean, he knew it. He didn't. He said, this was the first turning of Jonah. He said, okay, I will sacrifice me for you guys. I will take the judgment. You guys don't have to do that. You didn't do anything wrong. I take the judgment. But it was an act of decreation. When we invite our wrongdoing into our lives, we are undoing the things that God is creating in us. We are inviting decreation into our lives. If Kathy and I are having something in between us, and I refuse to forgive her, I'm inviting decreation into my life. I am sinning. I am not doing right, however right I think I am. I am not working it out. When we invite things like that into our lives, into our relationships, we will suffer the results of the sin that we have. It is an act of decreation. We are going against what He is creating in us. So they picked up Jonah and they hurled him into the sea. And the sea ceased from its raging. But see the symbolism there? And Jonah spent 3 days in the belly of a fish. And Jesus refers to this story. And he says, just like Jonah, 3 days. And they didn't know what he was talking about. But they found out. Saved through the waters of chaos. Yeah, how can this be? We might be We might be rooting, for the Israelites, and we think, great, yeah, the Egyptians, they just got what, they deserve. That's okay. That's judgment. God, there's the bad guys and there's the good guys. See, the problem is, they're all bad guys. Those slaves, they just didn't have the power to do all the bad that they would have liked to have done. We're all bad guys. There's no good guys in this scenario other than God. They were saved not because they were good. We are saved not because we are good. We are saved because God chose us. How can this be? It's grace. It is profound. It reaches into the soul of who we are, and we cannot believe it. It's hard to believe. In fact, we will spend the rest of our life coming to terms with, I'm amazed that you saved me. And as we walk out this life, as we screw up things and we just mess it up and we have wrong thoughts and we do wrong things, we do dumb things, His grace still pours out on us. And we turn to Him in repentance and we say, you have something better for me, God. You have something better for me. The fear that is controlling my life, that is keeping me from moving forward with you, God, I need to quit complaining and follow you. The things that get between me and my relationship with you, God, you're asking me to deal with. And it's sometimes a little scary. Because you're asking me to reveal things that need to come to light, that they will die in the light. But right now, there are things in people's lives that live in darkness. When you bring them to light, they will die. What lives in darkness dies in the light. Here's the gospel. God did not give the Israelites the law and said, I will save you. He brought them out, took them through the Red Sea, and gave them the law. The rules of life and how to conduct yourself and to honor God will not save you. But He will. And then after that, He'll say, hey, let's work on stuff. Let's grow. Let's become a people. That's grace. That's the gospel. You are once out, now you're in. You were once under the threat of an enemy that said he can kill you and destroy you, and the next moment you're on the other side and that enemy is cut off. That's the gospel. You once were a slave, now you're free. That's the gospel. That's the good news. You're forgiven. And now you walk in that forgiveness. Let's pray. Father God, Lord, you continually remind us of who you are and what you are doing. You are making us a free people. You're reminding us of what caused us to be free, and that's our turning to you. And then you ask us to walk that out. And Lord, you show us a promised land. A land that we look forward to on our journey. We're not there yet. But Lord, there will be a day. We thank you and praise you in your name. Amen.